The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I am sitting in for Dave, who is enjoying his Christmas holiday. Well, I'm sure it's just a holiday for Dave. Yes. Pat, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Yeah, David is en route to, I think, Italy. No, he's going to London right now. So we have Ben Dixon filling in for him, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show. That's
me, and it's the day after Christmas, and I am enjoying some Earl Grey tea in a Doctor Who TARDIS cup. This was my favorite, well, one of my favorite Christmas gifts this year. But the other favorite gift that I got was the insanity that was Donald Trump on yesterday. He is the gift that keeps on giving. But in actuality, this story is about a press release from the RNC that some people think compared Donald Trump to Jesus. Let's take a look at it. All right, so here it is. Merry Christmas to all. This is from Reince Priebus from the RNC. He says, over 2 millennia ago, a new hope was born. It sounds like the opening to Star Wars. A savior who would offer the promise of salvation to all mankind, blah, blah, blah. Just as 3 wise men did on that night, this Christmas heralds a time to celebrate the good news of a new king. You can clip there. That's good. Let's talk about that. So a lot of people took this to mean that Reince Priebus was comparing Donald Trump to Jesus, or calling Donald Trump the new king. This is, to me, I think this is more about how confusing the English language could actually be. I don't think that he was actually comparing Donald Trump to Jesus or stating that Donald Trump was the new king. However, I can see if people read that sentence and have no context to religious jargon, I can see how they can mistake that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there was some folks on the left who were kind of overreacting to seeing that. But, I mean, Jesus has been referred to as the new king for, centuries now, and maybe they just didn't understand that context.
Yeah, and I guess it speaks to the godless liberals that we are, right?
Yeah.
We're all godless liberals. So, of course, we're not going to understand if you say a new king. We think you're talking about the newly elected president. So it's really a story about the English language and lack of context. And it to me could have been a funny story, except for Sean Spicer, who is Donald Trump's incoming press secretary. You can see a picture of him on the screen. Instead of doing what a press secretary does, which is to clarify, to make things plain and explain, instead of doing that, he decided to do this on Twitter. He said, it's sad that BuzzFeed Ben, a writer for BuzzFeed, obviously, condones this attack on Christ on such a holy day for Christians. BuzzFeed must apologize. So here's the spin, and this is amazing, right? So because the left, the godless liberal left, they don't understand the context of a new king, and they wrote a story about it. If you go to BuzzFeed, you can see the story. It's basically saying some people are confused by this statement. Okay, fine. But because BuzzFeed wrote that story, Sean Spicer, instead of clarifying, or even instead of taking the sarcastic high road and saying you guys are idiots, because basically the left, they were idiots with this one, right? This is a non-story. But instead of taking that route, he decides that this is an attack on Christ vis-a-vis the war on Christmas.
Right, that's exactly it. I think it's just the latest chapter to the war on Christmas, because they feel like they've won that war now that Donald Trump's been elected president, and of course they're going to double down whenever they can. Right,
because, you could not possibly say Merry Christmas while Obama was president, even though he said Merry Christmas like ad nauseum. I'm thinking a lot of our listeners and a lot of David's listeners were tired of how often Obama said Merry Christmas, but I digress. The point is, instead of doing what a press secretary could do, should do, and instead of I would love for the opportunity to clown someone who made this dumb of a mistake, but instead of taking that road, he decides to double down with this war on Christmas and a tactic that is so familiar from Donald Trump, which is feigning as though you are the victim and then demanding someone apologizes. This to me is more about what the next 4 years is going to look like, right? Instead of doing the sensible, pragmatic thing, which was, hey, liberals, you guys are idiots. You didn't even know that we refer to Jesus as the new king. You're so dumb. Instead of doing that, he decides to go with, you need to apologize for this attack on Christ. It's going to be a long 4 years, man.
It's like he's the one who is overly offended and feels like he's a special snowflake and needs a safe space.
Right. I mean, you need a safe space from someone. I mean, he could have scored so many points on how uninformed liberals are with regard to religion, which they want to be. Like, I mean, not in all liberals. Like, I'm a religious liberal, so I knew what they were talking about. But I also saw how that statement could be confusing. But instead of doing what a press secretary does, he did what Donald Trump does, which is to double down on stupid and try to force someone to apologize. This is going to be an amazing, and by amazing, I mean, well, this is a radio show, so I can't say. It's going to be a crazy 4 years. Speaking of how crazy the next 4 years is going to be, Donald Trump, this weekend, before the holiday could get kicked off in earnest, Donald Trump decides to tweet out that America, actually, let me read his words exactly. The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. Okay, Pat, so the tweet is, should we even try to analyze it? It's Donald Trump. But here's the thing. Saying that until the world comes to its senses on nukes, while starting the tweet saying we need to expand our nuclear capacity, is enough ammunition, no pun intended, for the rest of the world to never come to their senses on nukes. Like if you say, hey, we are going to build our nuclear capacity, then every nuclear state is going to build their capacity further. And non-nuclear states are going to see, okay, well, this is the world we live in. We need to build. So this tweet itself is undermining any common sense with regard to nukes. Yeah,
I think since the end of the Cold War, we have come to our senses regarding nuclear weapons and how powerful they can be.
Exactly. And so with this story, I don't know if anyone's watching, anyone puts themselves through this and watches Morning Joe, but Mika Brzezinski mentioned on Morning Joe on Friday morning that in her conversations with Donald Trump, he said, if there's an arms race, let there be an arms race and we'll outspend them and we'll win. So two things. One, I think Donald Trump really believes this, right? Two, I think he does not care that it undermines his very intention of the world coming to its senses on tweets. But number three, this is more of anything else. This is a signal to defense contractors, particularly nuclear contractors, that we're getting ready to spend a whole lot of money, and this is going to be Christmas for them for the next 4 years.
He's also just entirely ignorant when it comes to the issue of nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
If you remember during one of the Republican debates, the nuclear triad,
right.
B-52s, the submarines and the missiles,
right.
And, in the context of them being very outdated. And he just went on this rambling word salad kind of response to it.
Right. So he is completely uninformed. And poorly misinformed. Like he's both, right? He really buys. Well, anyway, that's a whole different story.
And that's because in his briefings that he's gotten, he keeps bringing up the issue of nuclear weapons and asks, why can't we use them?
Right. That was the other story from earlier this year, particularly. It's like Morning Joe gets all of these off the record scoops with Donald Trump. And I use scoops really loosely. But that was what Joe Scarborough said earlier this year with regard to Donald Trump and nuclear weapons. He asked over and over again, why can't we use them? And so, I don't know. Here's my problem. I have a lot of people, and I hang out with a lot of people on the far left, right? I'm pretty far left. And I see a lot of people on the far left who dismiss this story as nonsense, as though it's not really something we should worry about. Donald Trump is not going to be that imbecilic and stop, fear mongering, trying to, this is this weird intersection between the rejection of the Democratic status quo, which the Democratic status quo is absolutely running to the hills with this one. Right? They're taking Donald Trump to the woodshed with this. So you have the far left, which I'm a proud member of, who looks at this and says, oh, well, it's not really a scary story. Don't try to make it out to be that bad. But I'm like, these are words coming out of the mouth of the president-elect of the United States. Like everything he says now is 100% newsworthy, as well as something we should take seriously.
It's like he's trivializing the issue of nuclear weapons as if it's some sort of bargaining chip for him. He's coming off of these so-called victories when it comes to the Ford deal and the carrier deal, and I think he's just trying to leverage Putin in a certain way and gets what he wants in this sense too.
Right, and so in this case, it's not just, right, you're absolutely right there. It's not just Putin, it's every nuclear armed nation that listens to this and says, okay, we're going to start spending again. Now, granted, we waste more. We waste more in defense contracts than most nations combined put into it. So they can't outspend us. He's right in that regard. But that makes us that much more unstable because now people who are, they feel like they're in a weaker position. It's like a caged animal, right? You back an animal into a corner, they're going to lash out violently. So this type of language itself, and this is what I think I want to convey the most, is this language, the tweet itself, is a dangerous thing because of what it signals to the international community.
And we also have enough nuclear weapons on the planet to blow the world over 20 times.
Exactly.
You know, enough is enough. We don't have to be spending all this money. It's going down the drain. It's
going down the drain. And so this is the last thing I'll say on this one, because this one kind of, it bothers me more from the critical analysis of my friends on the left. Here's the thing. If you thought Hillary Clinton's no-fly zone was going to lead to a nuclear war with Russia, which was a prevailing theory during the election, how could you not be concerned about a guy who says we want to double down on an arms race, on the Cold War, spending money on nuclear weapons? It's like something's not connecting there for me.
Maybe because there's been so much criticism of him being buddy-buddy with Putin as of recently, he's trying to play the other end to it too. I mean, that's one theory I may have.
I mean, but that would be a safe theory if the only other nuclear power in the world was Russia. But
they do have the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but
one on that front.
I mean, it only takes one or two to set everything in motion.
Totally,
right?
Yep.
So anyway, that's Donald Trump. This has been our holiday, Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever you want to call it. This has been our weekend with our incoming president-elect.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
In the news the news doesn't wait on anyone. The U.S. abstained from vetoing a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlements. I want to bring the language up on the screen, if you don't mind, Pat, so we can see specifically what was said. The resolution said it's condemning all measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, and status of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, including the construction and expansion of settlements, transfer of Israeli settlers, confiscation of land, demolition of homes, and displacement of Palestinian civilians in violation of international humanitarian law and relevant resolutions. So this is the language, and it has set off a firestorm. And even though the language comes off as brash, and I'll just use that word, you could take it however you need to take it, it is a resolution that really had no teeth in terms of doing something. It's just a condemnation of the settlements, but you would have thought that this was the U.S. Well, anyway, I'll leave all hyperbolic language for my show later on. Let's pull up the statement from Samantha Power, who was the U.S. ambassador to the UN. She said, today, the Security Council reaffirmed its established consensus that settlements have no legal validity. President Obama and Secretary Kerry have repeatedly warned, publicly and privately, that the absence of progress towards peace and continued settlement expansion was going to put the two-state solution at risk and threaten Israel's stated objective to remain both a Jewish state and a democracy. This resolution reflects trends that will permanently destroy the hope of a two-state solution if they continue on their current course. All right, so that's one thing that she stated. I found it very interesting how the UN ambassador positioned the U.S.'s sentiment, and you can see it best demonstrated in this clip.
It is because this forum too often continues to be biased against Israel, because there are important issues that are not sufficiently addressed in this resolution, and because the United States does not agree with every word in this text, that the United States did not vote in favor of the resolution. But it is because this resolution reflects the facts on the ground and is consistent with U.S. policy across Republican and Democratic administrations throughout the history of the State of Israel that the United States did not veto it.
Okay, so it's interesting positioning there, right? So the first position is that that this resolution does not address all of the issues that concerns Israel, right? So the first half of her statement was very sympathetic towards Israel, and that this committee, the UN Security Council, has been unfair to Israel. You know, she's using language trying to position herself on the side of Israel as the reason why they didn't vote for the resolution.
Yeah, it's very calm diplomatic language. We can see she's not trying to burn any bridges here with Israel or with Netanyahu. Yeah,
but it didn't really matter because the second half of her statement burned all the bridges in the world, where she essentially said that this reflects the reality on the ground. It reflects the position of both Democratic and Republican administrations. It's pretty par for the course for many of America's positions on Israel. That's why they did not veto it. But in essence, not vetoing it is still tacit support for it. And this is what Netanyahu, of course, we have on the screen. This is what he's come out in full. You know, he's taken this as a full affront to the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And if you read this on the screen next, he said, according to our information, we have no doubt that the Obama administration initiated the resolution, stood behind it, coordinated the wording, and demanded it be passed. He also said, friends don't take friends to the Security Council. I thought that was both telling and hilarious for many, many reasons. It is on record that Egypt, in fact, initiated the resolution. However, Netanyahu rejects this. Now, I'm not dismissing the possibility that America could have had Egypt to put this resolution in. I get that. But as far as what's on the record, it's Egypt's resolution. And yet he's taking it out on America because America didn't veto it.
Yeah, Netanyahu is getting quite ahead of himself here. I mean, this is the first time that a vote in the UN that the U.S. has taken a position on it can even be perceived at all as anti-Israel. And we recently just approved a aid package, the largest in the two nations' history, of $38 million.
$30 billion.
Yes.
$38 billion, which is, according to, I forgot where Adam Johnson is from, Adam Johnson on Twitter, I think he's with Salon, which is more than the aid we send seven predominantly Muslim countries that we're bombing, including Somalia and Yemen. So we are sending a tremendous amount of aid to Israel, yet this is a complete condemnation of America by Benjamin Netanyahu, such to the point where he's recalled his ambassador to Israel, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He has he recalled many other ambassadors related to this, but his language specifically with regard to the outgoing Obama administration and his full embrace of the Trump administration shows you that he's trying to play on the steady divide that's always in the United States. You know, it's ironic that Republican administrations and Democratic administrations have held consistent positions in terms of policy on Israel and the two-state solutions. But Benjamin Netanyahu feels like Donald Trump is going to be a friend to Israel more so than the Democratic administration that's leaving. You can see on the screen here a tweet from Donald Trump as the UN. I'll switch back to that really quick. As to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. But here's a statement that more in depth with regard to the UN resolution. He said the resolution being considered at the United Nations Security Council regarding Israel should be vetoed. This was back on the 22nd of December. He went on to say, as the United States has long maintained, peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians will only come through direct negotiations between the parties and not through the imposition of terms by the United Nations. This puts Israel in a very poor negotiating position and is extremely unfair to all Israelis. My only question here, Pat, is, you know, the UN giveth and the UN taketh away. I mean, there's a lot that the UN has done in favor of Israel. So now all of a sudden is the UN the enemy of Israel, according to Donald Trump? I'm not really sure how to read that statement from him, or even if we should try to analyze it.
we probably shouldn't know. I think he's just trying to take both sides yet again.
Yeah. There's no reason to analyze this statement from Trump other than the fact that he is the president-elect, and so his statements like this have a lot of impact. In other news, President Obama thinks he would have won this election. And Pat, I think I agree. I think anybody should have been able to beat Donald Trump. Anybody other than Hillary Clinton, apparently.
That's the thing. I mean, the Democrats decided to nominate the second most unpopular candidate in our times, right?
Right.
The second only behind Donald Trump himself.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were so many negatives to her. He would have won in a landslide, I think. He has a 57 approval rating.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely right to say
I mean,
that.
damn FDR. Like, if FDR didn't get so greedy with 4 terms, I mean, we could have not had that legislation. Maybe Obama would have won. But let's listen to him in his own words. This is President Obama, and he's with David Axelrod speaking here.
I think that Hillary Clinton performed wonderfully under really tough circumstances. The problem is that we're not there on the ground communicating not only the dry policy aspects of this, but that we care about these communities, that we're bleeding for these communities,
Right.
that we understand why they're frustrated.
Okay. So we have more from Obama, but I do want to talk about that because, he's got a point there. That's where Democrats always fall. Well, I can't say always, but in modern history, this is where Democrats fall short, particularly Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton didn't go to Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton didn't invest time and money in a lot of these states where she lost. And no, the people don't feel like Democrats are bleeding for them. Like, we don't feel like that they are out there on the ground for us. We feel like we're numbers to them. And this is what has been echoed in this election.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that she lost this election in the Rust Belt. Thought that she had some of these states just in her bag, right?
Right.
Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Turns out she lost all 3.
All 3 of them. So in this regard, he's absolutely right. I think Obama would have won because, one, he never would have made that mistake, right? That type of mistake comes when you are overly confident and you think you're and you're not running as an underdog. You have to always, everything you do, no matter how successful you are, if you ever think that you're not the underdog, then there's an underdog coming to bite you in the ass.
Well, apparently, once Hillary won the nomination, some of the Bernie people came over to her team and tried to warn her that the signs were not looking good in those Rust Belt states, and she would just ignore it. The whole establishment behind her decided to just stay the course and not even campaign there for the most part.
Yeah, and I did want to title this because it would have been a great catchphrase to title this. Obama thought he would have won. Nah, Bernie would have won. Right? That's what I wanted to title this.
Bernie would have won.
But the truth of the matter is, both of them would have won. Right? Bernie seriously would have won because he runs as an underdog. His entire campaign was speaking directly to the problems that Obama mentioned in this clip. So Bernie would have won. Obama would have won. The only person who couldn't win, I think Martin O'Malley could have won. Only person who couldn't win was the person the Democrats. I'm sorry. I'm still passionate about this. I'm still amazed that we are now with President Donald Trump because Democrats nominated the second most unpopular candidate in modern history, second only to Donald Trump. Now, here's the rest of what President Obama said. He said, I am confident in this vision because I'm confident that if I had run again and articulated it, I think I could have mobilized a majority of the American people to rally behind it. Now, he started the entire conversation speaking good of Hillary Clinton, kind of like, she did good in really typical situations. But I think this is more about Hillary than it is about Trump. I think he's clearly stating that Hillary was not a convincing carrier of the message. She was not a convincing messenger.
Yeah, he had to play ball there, and he had to say that Hillary Clinton did her best and did a good job, but that's just party politics at the end of it. I think he definitely would have won. I think he would have ran a much more economically focused campaign as Bernie Sanders would have, and I think because he focused on the economy, that's a big reason why Trump won the election.
Now, here's the problem. Here's where I think Obama may not have won. Is because you can't run an economic populist campaign in your third term when you didn't do much about it in the first 2 terms. That's where the problem is. So could he have beaten Trump? Absolutely. But does he get a clean slate and able to come in and say, I'm the economic populist who's concerned about the American people? No, not really, President Obama. As much as I love you, you were a neoliberal who didn't really take care of the people that you think you would have won on. So maybe my title would be right, that no, Obama, you wouldn't have won, but Bernie Sanders would have.
Yeah, I think that message kind of worked well for his re-election campaign, at least his first one in this context, because he was able to market himself as the guy who saved GM and also passed the stimulus package and that the economy was bouncing back.
But that third
After
time
4
around,
years of not so much going on, it would be a lot harder.
So maybe that's the right title for this clip after all. All right.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Okay, so welcome back, folks, to the David Pakman Show. I'm Benjamin Dixon, and this Drexler University professor, all he wants for Christmas is white genocide, according to his tweet. Put the tweet up on the screen. All I want for Christmas is white genocide, tweeted on Christmas Eve. Now, I saw this tweet. I follow George Ciccariello-Maher. Ciccariello and then -Maher. I follow him on Twitter. He follows me back. So I saw this tweet, and I'm gonna be honest with you. My first reaction was laugh out loud, right? To be, I laughed out loud, literally.
You could tell he was being facetious right away.
Right. My second reaction was, there's no way in hell I'm retweeting this. The only reason is because, as wild as I get on Twitter, I have a very strict set of rules parameters in which I abide with, because I'm not going to be, you're not coming after me, not after my real job, right? So I was like, I get what he's saying. It's tongue in cheek, but damn, that's a hell of a tweet to put out there.
Well, especially because he's not so much of a public figure. I had never heard of him until today.
Yeah.
So if I had just come across that tweet, I would have thought that he was being serious.
Right,
not that he
right.
was joking.
And also if you come across that tweet and you don't know the backdrop of his work, right? I'm familiar with his work, and I'm still like, I'm not retweeting that. Right. I consciously made the decision not to retweet that, only because, I'm not politically correct. I'm just Twitter smart, right? I'm smart enough not to go down in flames on Twitter. So this has become a huge thing, as you can imagine. And we're going to talk about a couple of different nuances in it. Here's the response from Drexler University. Actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, here we'll go to the response.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Drexel became aware today of Associate Professor George Ciccariello-Maher inflammatory tweet, which was posted to his personal Twitter account on Christmas Eve. While the university recognizes the right of its faculty to freely express their thoughts and opinions in public debate, Professor Ciccariello-Maher's comments are utterly reprehensible, deeply disturbing, and do not in any way reflect the values of the university, and the university is taking the situation very seriously, and blah, 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 blah. All right, you see where they're going with this. They're in damage control. This is something they had to send out on Christmas Day, which means this dude is, George, hey, hopefully you can come on the show, but, you've got some hell to pay, because somebody had to take their Christmas break and worry about this.
Yeah, that's when you know you've done something wrong. When you have other people at a university, nonetheless, which is probably closed down for a month for that entire winter break, if they have to go back to work, you've done something pretty bad.
Right. So he's catching hell for it, and I get why. Because it becomes too politically easy for people to use your words against you, right? This is to be expected, right? People intentionally ignore sarcasm when it suits them. Problem is, he didn't even have a sarcasm tag in here. I knew he was being sarcastic, but the rest of the world wouldn't know.
Yeah, as I said, I would have no idea. Do you want to see his damage control now?
Yeah, let's see his damage control. Okay, so so this is what he tweeted later. And George, I love you, man. To clarify, when the whites were massacred during the Haitian Revolution, that was a good thing indeed. Okay, so now this goes into a much deeper conversation about the appropriate response to real oppression, like not just somebody calling you racist words. We're talking about being enslaved, right? What is the appropriate response? And he seems to think that, and I agree with him. Like, if somebody is imprisoning your life, you're a slave, rise up and overthrow your power. So I don't know if that's good damage control, though.
Right. Usually we see at least a non-apology when they're kind of backtracking for this, and they say, I apologize to whoever I offended. Yeah. He's not doing any of that. He's just doubling down here.
And I'm going to be honest with you. Like, even though I didn't retweet it, because I have my own specific set of rules that I abide by, I'm glad he didn't take it back, right? Because this is his fight to fight, right? But people have been peddling this white genocide lie for a long time. And if you Google even knows better. Google, pull up the screen. This is Google's definition of white genocide. White genocide is a white nationalist conspiracy theory that mass immigration, integration, miscegenation, low fertility rates, and abortion are being promoted in predominantly white countries to deliberately turn them minority white and hence cause white people to become extinct through forced assimilation. I mean, that's the dumbest thing. It's dumb, but it's prevalent. It's so prevalent that I'm sure some of the comments in this video are going to be giving us links proving white genocide.
Yeah, and that's quite the genocide where it takes place over many, many generations,
right?
Through interracial marriages and that sort of thing.
Right.
I mean, that's just crazy.
It's just complete nonsense. So from the perspective of the raw tweet, of course he is being sarcastic in the sense that white genocide doesn't exist. But this is a hell of a fight that George has on his hand. George, I'm with you. I'm standing with you in solidarity, man. I just wasn't going to retweet that because I saw I'm sorry, the regular radio.
You're good.
I saw the storm that was coming. So here's the other thing. This is the last thing I want to say about this. This idea that there has been a white genocide or the stripping of whiteness in America. This is not just a white nationalist conspiracy theory. This has made its way all the way to Fox News, into the White House now, right? But here's a clip of Bill O'Reilly discussing the same concept, but from a nicely curated and presented position.
Do you understand, and I'm not saying this in a condescending way, you're smarter than I am, but do you understand what the New York Times wants and the far left want? They want to break down the white Christian male power structure of which you're a part, and so am I. And they want to bring in millions of foreign nationals to basically break down the structure that we have.
So this is not something that George Ciccariello pulled out of the thin air, right? These are thoughts that people promote all the way to the White House. Steve Bannon believes this through and through. Right. Fox News, Bill O'Reilly. I mean, he has more viewers than any other television commentator, I think. So this is a real thing, thought process that somehow we are going to de-white America and turn it into, and we're intentionally doing it. And so therefore, this is white genocide. This is just Bill O'Reilly's nice way of saying that, of saying the same exact thing that alt-right Nazis say, but he's fixed it up and made it all nice and presentable for Fox News.
Yeah, these alt-right neo-Nazis are usually just more upfront about what they have to say, but Bill O'Reilly's hiding behind his suit and his more polished way of speaking and really communicating the same message. The same message,
which is basically saying that there's nothing wrong with whiteness. There's nothing wrong with white supremacy. The only thing wrong in America is diversity, right? Diversity is the problem in America. Let Bill O'Reilly tell it. I mean, hell, listen to him here.
So-called white privilege, bad. Diversity, good.
All right. So we'll talk about that clip a little bit later in the show. But this is a tough spot. This is a non-issue. But when you give the vultures fodder, they will circulate. They will circulate and they'll come after you. So this is what's happening in our world, even as we speak. All right. Speaking of white supremacy, speaking of white genocide. So A&E was getting ready to do an entire documentary series on the KKK. And the title of it, I believe, was going to be Escaping the KKK. So they weren't going to do this and show any favorable light to the Klan. But a part of this required that they pay Klansmen. And once that became known, there was a big protest. There were boycotts. There were all type of campaigns to pull this show. And essentially that's what happened. So A&E, they stated their goal was always with the series was always to expose and combat racism and hatred in all of its forms. Well, here's the thing, Pat, and maybe you can help me with this. The problem is that while you may be trying to shine a negative light on the Klan, elevating the Klan to this national level, once again, obviously, you're going to have the opposite effect where people look at it with endearment.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of shows like this. This whole idea has been played out plenty of times before. And I don't usually take up too much of an issue with it, except for the fact that they're going to be paying these people as staff. It's not just a reality TV show. These are going to be, people on their payroll, and I can see why that's facing a lot of backlash now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like it's the normalization. It's profiting off of bigotry, number one, right? So that's nothing new. We have Fox News. There's plenty of opportunity to profit off of bigotry vis-a-vis Fox News.
It's like the clickbait of TV.
That's exactly what the hell it is. It's the clickbait of TV, but you also normalize it, right? We're in this stage where you can have people like Richard Spencer, who is the leader of the new alt-right movement, who gets all this airtime because he's the dapper, quote unquote, dapper neo-Nazi. And we have all of these interviews taking place, all of these profiles by major media outlets. So you get this normalization effect, not only the normalization of bigotry, but also the profiting off of bigotry. I mean, I don't think this was a good idea to begin with, right? So the fact that it's having to be pulled at this point, it's really should have been expected. Like who's running production in some of these places? Like, did you not see this coming?
Right. The public shouldn't have to find out about this, and that's the right reason why you decide to pull the show.
Exactly.
That should be part of your business ethics at the first place.
Which takes me to the next layer, right? So there's obviously been some research done. I don't think any show ever comes on without there being some market research. There's obviously some interest in these neo-Nazi, Klan, bigoted elements of America, which is why you see all of these profiles happening, all of this new emphasis. And I don't know if it's only because of Trump, but I think it's been helped by Trump. So what do you do? What do you do when a portion of America wants this type of programming, and then you have the other half of America, or I don't know what percentage, but you have the rest of America who's saying, hell no.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Donald Trump is the gift that keeps giving. I said this, he's going to be horrible for the world. But in terms of just like media, he is the gift that keeps giving, especially his disillusioned supporters. He has not even been sworn into office, and his supporters are starting to lose their minds. No one is documenting this better than a guy I follow on Twitter, at Free Your Mind Kid. I love the handle. Black Aziz Ansari, he has been recording, and just pull up an example of what he does. So he goes and he finds tweets of people back in November when they were on a high from Donald Trump, and compares after he makes decisions like, putting Goldman Sachs back in charge of the government. And here's a tweet from Sharon Smith. She said on December 2nd, she said, "You make us proud, Donald Trump. We enjoyed you. Thank you speech. We enjoyed you." I don't know what language she's speaking, but anyway, a few days later on December 10th, she said, "Just for believing in you in the first place. You could not even wait until you were sworn in. You screwed all of us." I mean, let's just switch off. Let's just talk about Mrs. Smith here. I mean, granted, of course, there are going to be people who are disillusioned, but should we take so much joy in the fact that they're disillusioned?
I think these people got conned. I think that's pretty evident. I mean, during the campaign, they would just back him no matter what. Trump said that he would shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any voters.
Loved it. No, he's totally backtracked. I mean, he's backtracked so much on prosecuting Hillary, which a lot of people lost their minds over, right? We're not going to prosecute Hillary, and they would have swore he was Lucifer incarnate. And then he backed down on building the wall per se, but then he came back and said, okay, we're going to build the wall. Then he doubled back down on draining the swamp. He had Corey Lewandowski go on the media and say, well, we're not really going to focus on draining the swamp as much as we are fixing the economy. Then he had to come back and say, oh, no, we are going to drain the swamp. It's because he's trying to have it both ways. I think that's Donald Trump's MO.
Yeah, in the weeks after the election, we did a story about the campaign promises that he's since broken. It was something like 12, and that was just a week or two after the election. At this point, months after, you'd have to imagine that's much higher. That list is growing and growing.
Yeah, exactly. And to see the tears, right? I mean, I try to be the bigger person, but, I am enjoying seeing this. Let's go back to Black Aziz Ansari on the second one at the bottom. This is from Frank. Frank said back in November 13th, he said, "Great job, President Trump. We're 100% in support of you. Good luck, sir." And then like a week later, he says, DT, Donald Trump, you lied to me about Hillary Clinton. You're no better than the New York Times. I contributed money to you. I fell for your lies. Shame.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's pretty obvious. This guy had to pay up how many millions of dollars because he defrauded students at Trump University. This guy, that's what he does.
I mean, like, okay, so a couple of things that, like, I'm old, so I have these old colloquials that come to mind. Like, you lay down with dogs, you get fleas, right? My dad always said, like, you can feed an alligator, you can feed people to the alligator, but at the end of the day, you'll be the last one he eats. Same thing with Donald Trump. You can use Donald Trump to explore all of your delusions of grandeur and your delusions of how you think the political system should be, more is really what I meant to say. You could think Donald Trump was going to do that for you because of all the things that he said, but he's a crook. He's a con man. And so while you're using this con man to get your political liquid dreams, of course he's going to turn around and con you himself.
You know, it's funny that we're getting this terminology of con man and phony from Mitt Romney himself.
Yeah.
And he actually did the opposite of what some of these users are saying. Trying to position himself to become Secretary of State. He backed off all of that trash talk and started to suck up to Trump. And it didn't work out well for him. He got embarrassed on a public stage.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have to give context for the word I'm getting ready to use. So NPR just did an explainer on the word cuck, right? And they did a full-blown, historical background, everything, explaining why the alt-right is now using this word with regard to people like Mitt Romney. This will be one of the few times you'll see me ever agreeing with the alt-right, because Donald Trump totally cucked the hell out of Mitt Romney with that dinner party, and then say, never mind, Mitt, we don't want you as Secretary of State.
And did you see that picture from that dinner party where they're all sitting around eating frog legs? Of course, because the pretension wasn't already through the roof at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see Trump like positioning himself as if he's the devil, and you see Mitt Romney having to turn around, and it's clear that he's just sucking up to him, and it didn't work out well.
Bruh, Mitt Romney looked like someone who was on a date with oh God, I'm getting into all kind of troubles now. He's on a date with a woman he didn't particularly find attractive and didn't think somebody was going to see him in public. That's
like
how Mitt Romney.
The Tinder photos were deceiving, and that's what he showed up.
That's how, and this is why I say Donald Trump cucked the hell out of Mitt Romney. And actually, he did it to all of America, right? Let's not just, misery loves company, Mitt. All of his supporters who are now disillusioned, they're just losing their minds because they realize they elected a con man. Yes, you elected a con man who has no interest in helping you and every interest in helping his bottom line. Congratulations, Republicans. You played yourself. Pat, I'm not afraid of a lot. I'm not afraid of much of anything, to be honest with you.
You don't seem like you would be.
But 2016 scares the hell out of me.
And why is that?
Because 2016 is ruthless as hell, man. Like, okay, folks, by now you already know George Michael died on Christmas Day on yesterday. And the tally of celebrities who have died in 2016 is sobering. We have a few on your screen now. David Bowie, Gene, I forgot Wildman, thank you. Muhammad Ali, Florence Henderson from the Brady Bunch mom died. Come on. Prince got me. I didn't see Prince coming whatsoever. And I was watching, full disclosure, I live in political worlds too much that I actually need something as corny as Full House. So I was watching Fuller House on Netflix, and Alan Thicke came on, and I'm laughing watching Alan Thicke. Next thing you know, he's dead. So I'm like, 2016 is ruthless as hell. And when you think about all the celebrities who died, I actually think about those who are still alive, who are riddled with scandal, who probably wish 2016 would go ahead and take them.
Yeah, some of these celebrities I didn't have the strongest connection to, I would venture to say. David Bowie, Prince, not necessarily. All I knew, this guy, Thicke. Alan Thicke. Yeah. All I knew him from was those reverse mortgage commercials.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't too negatively impacted by it.
Yeah.
You have those legendary fighters like Muhammad Ali. Kimbo Slice died this year.
It was crazy. Kimbo Slice, Phife Dawg from A Tribe Called Quest. You had so many people, so many talented people who died this year. And, I'm going to say a name that I think probably would be grateful if 2016 would take him out. Bill Cosby probably would be happy, just to get this over with, because he's a celebrity who's getting ready to face, I don't know what 2017 brings for him, but, 2016 has been ruthless, and the people that it's taken away, even over the weekend, Carrie Fisher, Princess
heart
Leia.
attack,
She
yeah.
had a heart attack. And so we're like, okay, is 2016 going to do her in? Not that I'm too concerned about the Queen and the King, the Queen of Queen Elizabeth or whatever her name. I don't even know her name. What was her name?
Queen Elizabeth?
Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, Queen Elizabeth. I don't know what number she is though. Like what number is she?
Second.
The second.
And she's
Well,
90 years old.
she's old, right? Yeah. But she's like got checked into the hospital the weekend for heart conditions and all this kind of stuff. So it's like 2016 is calling names and taking numbers, and I don't even want to talk bad about it because I'm like, we still have a whole week to go.
Yeah, and a lot of these people aren't even in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. They're in the prime of their life, or they're at their 50s or so. And there's also been, just bringing this back to the realm of politics, some political deaths this year. We had Nancy Reagan, I think, at the very beginning of the year, Antoine Scalia, which caused a big deal in terms of the presidential election and the Supreme Court, who's going to control that for the future. So a lot of these deaths had a lot of far-reaching impact.
And I'm thinking about like even the non-political deaths. Like I think a lot of people celebrated the death of Antonin Scalia. Well, yeah, okay, hey, do your thing. But I'm thinking about Anton Yelchin, the young guy who played in Star Trek. I can't think of the character name he played. I'm horrible with names, but he was 27 years old. And he died suddenly when a car fell on him. He was fixing something on his car. The car lost its grounding and fell on him. And his friends found him later on.
Jeez.
It's been a really rough year for celebrities, and we still have a week to go. So chill out, 2016.
Fidel Castro, got to point that one out.
Fidel Castro, right? Fidel Castro. So 2016, just take a vacation. You have a whole week to chill. But something tells me we'll have some more stories to report on, unfortunately. Hopefully not mine. Last story of the day is actually my favorite story of the day. So during a Christmas mass, instead of printing Hail Marys, a church actually printed the lyrics to Tupac's Hail Mary. Pull it up on the screen. You got to see this to believe it. So this is actually in the insert. And they didn't see anything wrong with it when they started off with Machiavelli and this bleep.
Illuminati.
Illuminati. I'm like, at some point you have to think this may not be right. The chorus, come with me, Hail Mary, run quick seed. Something should tell you once you got to the line of what's the opening line? I'm not a killer, but don't push me. Revenge is the sweetest joy. Next to getting, once you get to that, something's got to tell you that you're printing the wrong thing in the church bulletin.
Yeah, I'd have to say the chorus isn't going to draw any eyes to it. I think a lot of people may glance over the chorus, but if you take a look at those verses, that's clearly not the Hail Mary they were going for.
I mean, like, this is the gift. I think this was better than Trump over the weekend. Like this was a Christmas miracle for this to happen and to be printed and then get international coverage because Tupac has made his mark on 2016. Tupac has waded in on the war on Christmas. Like this is like all things sacrilegious, and I love it.
I mean, in terms of Tupac songs, though, it could have gotten along a lot worse. What if they printed out like "Hit 'Em Up" or another song like that, and that's the one that they decided to recite
let me be
in
honest
church?
with you. Like the first two words in some of Tupac's songs are so, it could have been a lot worse. So Hail Mary is the least of the problems, I think.
And how could this have possibly happened? I mean, someone working at the church decided that they were going to pull up the lyrics online and accidentally just chose the ones by the wrong artist?
Like, this is a good question. Like, so if you Google Hail Mary, like, you have to have no grounding in Catholicism, which I don't. I don't know anything about Catholicism, but I also do have some common sense to know that I shouldn't pull up the very first thing that says Hail Mary without actually reading through it and comparing. I don't know.
Maybe one of the altar boys was just trolling everyone and succeeded.
And you know what? That could be the case. If this was a troll job, this guy wins Troll of 2016. He deserves an award and a round of applause because this was immaculate. As immaculate as the conception, Da-doons. All right, folks, that's all I've got for today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.